You're listening to the People's Podcast.
I'm not going to be responsible for what happens next.
This is JSC Radio.
Well, people of color have been talking about these everyday instances of racism forever, right? And to that day, Michelle spoke up first, and then I shared that video. And really, that's the first time that I've seen that it's entered the public consciousns and created that kind of a conversation. And to be real, we think it's because someone who looks like me shared it. There are not nearly enough white people speaking up. Yeah.
This is JSC Radio. Now, I told you guys that episode 80 was going to be a pretty special one and a pretty important one. Now, the first segment of this show, you just heard me tell my story of essentially driving while black. Well, that's one of them. I've got thousands of them. That particular one, as you heard, dealt with the wonderful evening where I got followed home from a Burger King by a Michigan State police officer. That's always good. Well, I mentioned that this was going to be a very special show. Those of you who obviously have been paying attention to the news know that a couple months ago, there was an incident out here in Philadelphia at a Starbucks where two young men were waiting for a business associate, and the manager decided that would be the great time to call police because they were committing the crime of sitting in a Starbucks while waiting on somebody. Well, at the time, a very important video got out onto the internet. It was tweeted out, and I happened to have two of the women who were there that day, including one woman who managed to send out the tweet heard round the world about this Starbucks video. I'm sitting here in Philadelphia speaking with Melissa DePino and Michelle Saahene. Welcome to JSC Radio. First and foremost, before I go into anything dealing with that video, and I know you've been asked so many times about it and the whole incident, I want to get to know more about you two, because you two were more than just faceless people behind the video, and you're also a part of you've come together with this organization, and I want you to talk about this movement that you're leading first and foremost before we go into anything else. So whichever one of you want us to get started, go right on ahead.
Okay, well, thank you for talking with us. We're really happy to be here with you. We'll talk about the Starbucks later. Like you said, we've talked about it tons of times. But what's really important is afterwards, we realized a bunch of things. We realized that, Michelle, who is a lovely young black woman, was the first person to speak up that day. And I am I like to say, middle-aged white lady who shared that video and wrote a caption that called out the racism. And we really believe that one of the reasons it went so viral was because it was shared by a white person. And then we did lots of research, and we talked to lots of people, and there's data that says the social networks are segregated. We know this, right? Our social networks are segregated. So if you're white, it's likely that 93% of your social network is white. We also found out from a survey that 80% of the white respondents said they heard about the Starbucks incident, but half of them said that it wasn't indicative of a larger problem, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Of course.
So those things, plus all the conversations that were happening in our white circles of friends, because Michelle grew up in a white community, and most of her friends are white, I would say, that she grew up with. Mm-hmm. Led us to say, okay, there are not nearly enough white people speaking up, sharing, and amplifying the voices of people of color. And racism, we know, is a white problem. It's not a black and brown problem. And people of color have been fighting racism for hundreds of years because they have to, but white people have a choice. And we're not taking it, and we need to start taking it. So our project is called From Privilege to Progress. We're calling on white people, white allies, to show up against racism and to come together and to speak up every single time you see something. And when you're with a white audience, speak up. And when you're with a black audience, you should listen and you should amplify their voices.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to encourage black people to talk about their experiences more, because me growing up in a white town, I never felt like I had a voice. I know how daunting that can be, to be in a room full of white people and feel like they're not going to understand me. But at the same time, then you're not exposing them to what racism looks like today. And I think that's the biggest problem, is that because this is not the 1960s and, you know, there aren't people being lynched in the streets necessarily, and people aren't, you know, out with their big hoses, you know, like you're not seeing the riots.
A little bit, right?
No, right. I mean, it's there,
Welcome
but
to Trumpville.
yeah, exactly. It's there, but it's shaped differently today. And I want people to know what it looks like so they can be an effective ally. If you don't know what's going on, you can't help us. And growing up in a white school, my Black history was minimal. It was almost nothing. Almost everything that I know about Black history, I had to learn on my own.
Wow.
I had to teach myself.
Now where are you from?
Hershey area.
Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Well, yeah, Palmyra, Pennsylvania. It is all white. At least when I grew up, it was almost all white people. But my parents are African, so there's a lot of pride in my house. But then when you go outside of the house, you feel something different.
When you say they're African, from what country?
They're from Ghana.
From Ghana, okay.
Yes, so Ghanaians are very proud people. So I was having a hard time identifying myself. Am I African American? But like they're treated like shit, and I didn't want to feel that, you know. But being with all my white friends, I didn't feel comfortable with them either, and I just had a lot of turmoil in my brain for years and years and years and years. So been to Africa a couple times, and the last time that I went in March, something just changed me. I feel like I was decolonized in a sense, and I just saw the way that they were living, and I just experienced a different life. And when I came back here, that pride was reinstilled in me. And so I started doing a lot more research. I watched 13th, and that changed my life. I could not look at an African American the same way after watching that. Just to see what like really was going on, I would look at someone and I would physically feel something in my chest, and it hurt. And I thought to, when I was in Ghana, I went to a slave castle. I stood where they stood. I watched I heard the stories, and you can't not get sick to your stomach. You can't come back here and not look at these people and be like, they are so strong to have gone through that, and look at them prospering still. But I think because of part of the reason that they're so strong is because white people are just so bent on tearing them down because they are so strong. It doesn't matter what you put Black people through. They'll come out of it.
It's a fight. It's a battle.
It's a fight.
And
it's a battle that needs white people.
And it doesn't have to be that, right? Why can't we live together?
To work together with you, and that's the thing, is that that's why the project From Privilege to Progress, we're asking white people to educate themselves, understand what privilege means,
yes,
and that it's not personal, that it's systemic,
yes,
and that when they can use that privilege for the greater good, they can use that privilege to speak up when they see something and to amplify things that need to be amplified in their white networks. Because I can't tell you how many people in my white circle who are liberals, progressives, would say things to me like, I never knew that happened until you tweeted it. Or, there has to be more to that story. Or, I sometimes I see that stuff, but I don't know what I can trust and what I can't trust, like what's actually true or not true. But when you shared it, I believed it to be true. So, my God, okay, then all of us should be speaking up. We're getting other people to listen. And it sucks, and it's part of the whole problem that there are a lot of white people not listening to Black people. But if there are other white people that are going to speak up, then it's going to help.
So what was it that brought you to this, almost to this side, I should say?
Dude, I can't. Okay, so what somebody said to me recently, I've been thinking about this because I'm a writer, and I'm thinking about writing something about it because, because
you write children's books and things.
No, I write fiction, and I do, and I just had a nonfiction thing come out, but and I write essays. But so I was thinking about this, and I thought I knew a lot of things. Okay, I was thinking back my whole past. I grew up in an all white, I only knew 2 Black people. Okay, all white, Catholic, Irish, and Italian area. And I remember probably the first thing was we watched Roots when I think I was 9 years old, maybe? When Roots came out?
This late 70s. Roots was, I think, about 78.
Oh, we're Asian me now. Yes, exactly. Well, then I was a little...
You're right. You're a touch older than I am, but I do remember Roots. Yes. It had to be about 78, 79. I remember because they ran it in reruns in the early 80s, and this first time I saw it.
Exactly. And that was a big... I remember watching that, and then I also... remember my parents both taught in a public high school in Northeast Philly, and they had their students were like a totally diverse bunch, like because they were in like lower Northeast, I guess you'd call that lower Northeast. So I would go see my mother in her class, and she had her one black friend who who worked at the school,
of course,
and who we love, and so these were all things, but it wasn't. And I also was a high school teacher in Camden, New Jersey, and when I got my teaching degree, I knew I was going to teach in an inner city, so I minored in African American Studies while I was at Temple, so I could like have some understanding. Let me tell you, all the things that I did that are way more, I think, than a lot of white people do, I did not actually really see my whiteness until the day in the Starbucks. That was like the first day when I actually felt my whiteness. For real. And ever since then, I walk around with probably like one little dot of awareness of how you guys might feel, because it's not coming at me. But I walk around and that's all I see. Like all I see is like I walk into a coffee shop and there's one black person and I think, oh my God, what must that feel like? I'm seeing the world through different eyes. I'm like realizing whiteness.
It's like everyone has that come to Jesus meeting when it comes to our blackness, for example. I grew up, and anybody who listens to the show knows I talk about it in Norton, and I grew up in Detroit. So my first come to Jesus meeting with my blackness was the first time when I played in I was playing in baseball leagues. I grew up a baseball player. And our all black team at a Catholic school, but about 90% of the team is black. There's like a couple of our pitchers were white guys. We had one white kid who was playing third base out in first baseman. It's the first time we play in these Catholic League games, and we're the only black kids on the field. Mm-hmm. And some of the things that were said to us, and I'm in 5th and 6th grade, I'm not thinking anything of it until it's like you haven't lived until a coach calls you an N-word as you streak past him rounding first base. Exactly. I don't use this word a lot on the show, but I have to. For instance, that was the first nigga moment that I had, where that's the first time I heard it said in my direction, and it stopped me. To the point where I got to say, I slowed up walking into second. I said, did he just, you don't think about it. And that's when you get that first reminder. Because people haven't known, Southeast Michigan is actually very questionably racist. It's like we try to find that out now. Yeah. And that's when I had my first moment. When I got to Michigan State University, it became very clear very quickly that I was no longer in Kansas anymore. And I get out there and it's like now all the Detroiters kind of stick together. All the Flint kids stick together. The Chicago kids stick together. We're all there. Being the lone black guy in the room is something I'm used to in newsrooms, in most radio stations, in most places I've covered events. It's a weird thing.
I'm sure.
And
I don't know I'll never know how that feels.
It's the strangest thing, and Michelle, you can speak, and I'm sorry, you can speak to this too. Being a black woman in an environment like that is light years different from even what it's like for us, because black men and black women have two different experiences altogether. And it's not something that we really talk about amongst ourselves, let alone in open company. So you mentioned you grew up in just outside of Hershey. I guess if you can give an example of kind of your first black quote unquote experience, or maybe one you had when you were a teenager or something like that, to give an idea of what you dealt with.
I actually had, I remember in 5th grade, someone said the N-word. And my white friend though, she actually was more upset than I was. I was more sad. And she beat the kid up. I remember his name.
She shows up.
His name is Kyle. I won't say his last name. Because I don't know where he's living right now.
Yeah. Where's she at?
Nicole Reichert, if you're listening, I appreciate you, girl.
Join us.
But I didn't have it that bad. But throughout, my school years, I noticed that my brothers had it worse than I did. Some of the same guys that would hit on me, I found out years later, were really nasty to my brother. And were racist towards him. And I'm like, how can you like me and want to date me, but you're mean to my... I think it comes down to just men being men, and it was a sexual thing. Like, even that goes back to slavery times, where I'm going to take that slave, I'm going to rape her, basically. I'm gonna impregnate her, but I'm never gonna. It's cool if you sleep with the girl.
Won't even acknowledge her in public.
Won't even acknowledge her in public. You know, and that was, you know, and then in high school, I dated a white boy, and his family was very, very nice to me until we were on the outs, and then I was the black girl.
Oh boy.
And then actually kind of forgot about that. And now that I'm like thinking about it, I was like, yeah, they were really shitty once I didn't want to be with their son anymore. And then when I was 23, 24, I was at a club and I was mistaken for a suspect. Now, I don't mind if I fit the description, that's fine. If it's a skinny, dark-skinned girl, fine, question me, I don't care. But they made me feel like I was guilty. I remember I was so scared that I actually almost wet myself. I'm a 24-year-old girl and I'm like going to pee myself because I was terrified. And it's funny because the suspect was, she was apparently like an actual thieving whore. And I'm like, do I look like a thieving whore to you? I work at Nationwide Insurance, right? I don't know what you're talking about. Honey, you don't look like a thieving whore. You guys can't see her, but she's beautiful. I was like,
she's
you
not
think
a
I did
whore.
what? I was stunned. I was like, you gotta be kidding me right now. So at the end of the interaction with the cop, he was so nasty to me that when I realized that I was okay, I said something to him and I said, that was not okay. You treated me like I was guilty. He got in my face and he pointed his finger. He said, this is your fault. And I go, my fault for being black? I was fuming. A white cop grabbed my arm, pulled me aside, and she told me that I need to go report him because she has seen him be racist before in the past. And I was like, oh my God. So I went to the police station.
You're around all these white people who are showing up. You're drawing them to you.
Right. So I go to the police station the next day and I report him, and they're like, oh yeah, it's not the first time we've had that complaint. I'm like, so why does he have a job? Why is he the lead police officer on an investigation where the suspect is black? And it made me think, you know, you try to be like a good black person. You try to be mild even though you feel fire. You try to not ruffle people's feathers because you don't want to be the Debbie Downer, even though someone made a racist joke and it hurt your feelings, but you don't want to, you know, you're in a room full of white people. But that's when I realized, no matter how polite I am, no matter how quiet I am, I can go to Penn State and get a great degree. It doesn't matter. I'm still black. And that's when I realized I was like, you know what? I gotta start hanging around more brown people. Because you know, it was just very, and I was still upset that day because at the club, not many people, no one said anything. I'm like, you guys all know me. You guys know I'm not a thieving whore, but no one said anything. You know, it was I felt very, very alone.
It's like you get that reminder.
Yes.
Everyone gets a reminder. My father is a cop, well, retired cop. He was a cop in Detroit for 34 years. And he has a phrase or a saying that he likes to tell me when people kind of question where his allegiance lies. Because my dad was one of the first cops in Detroit, one of the first black cops in Detroit after the riots in 67. So he goes in 73, and the department had basically gone through this wholesale makeover because you had this largely black city and this almost totally white police force. And that's what really exacerbated the whole thing in Detroit. Well, early 70s, they put this call out to get young black men to join the force. And my dad was trying to figure out what he wanted to do. He was working the auto plants, Detroit, of course, working the auto plants. And then he decided to try to join the police academy. And he gets in among the first real large class of wholesale black officers. Plus, they also crossed the first woman who was a police officer in Detroit, period. The first ever woman in Detroit was in his class. And he dealt with hazing. He dealt with the white officers were trying to scare off the new black recruits, leaving them out in the middle of the night to fend for themselves, and flattening tires and pouring sugar in gas tanks and stepping up and starting fights with guys. And my dad told me all this after he retired. He gets right in somebody's face and just said, look, man, I'm here. And if you tamper with my car again, they're going to be doing a report on you after I kick your ass. And it's just like, that's how it goes. So people ask my dad all the time, it's like, well, you were a cop for 34 years and everybody liked him because he worked in the neighborhood he grew up in. Everybody knew him to the point where there are kids who are now well past my age who walk up to my dad and say, I appreciate what you did for me and how you looked out for me and you did this for me. So they ask him, it's like, so when they ask you, are you a cop or are you black? Do you ever have a crossroads about that? And he looks and he just says calmly, I was a cop for 34 years. I've been a black man for 68. Do you know where and then that's all he needs to say because he knows. He gets pulled up. He's been pulled over. At 68 years old, he's been pulled over.
Oh my God.
And I've been in the car and he's had to whip out his badge and suddenly attitude changes. Cop sees the badge like, oh, hey, how's it going? Didn't mean to bother you. And they keep going. And my dad sees it all the time. It's like we have to have that reminder. I've been pulled over. I've been followed around stores. I've been characterized as the angry black man in newsrooms.
Can I say something to white people, please?
Absolutely. The mic is yours.
Okay, so all these things, hey, white people, white friends, if you're listening, and I hope you are, look, these experiences, I'm just learning, but these experiences that these guys go through, where, pulled over or cops called on them or followed around a store, they, correct me if I'm wrong, but those are the base experiences that lead to violence, that lead to somebody getting beat up or shot or whatever. That's part of the whole spectrum of racism. So when you don't pay attention to those everyday things, you're also ignoring the fact of mass incarceration. You are ignoring the fact that kids get shot in the back when they're running away from the cops because they're brown. Okay. I want to say something to all these wonderful white people who were at the protest today, protesting Pence. Thank you. That's great. But I do not want you to forget, when we are advocating for these immigrant children, that at the root of this problem is racism. Okay? If these were white children, this would not be happening this way on the part of the government. It wouldn't be. And so you have to remember, yes, we need to get out there, and we need to keep the families together, and we need to advocate for these immigrant children, and we need to think about immigrants, but we have to think about how this administration, everything they do has racism at the root of it. And if you are white, it is your responsibility to fight racism from the inside. Educate yourself, talk to your white friends, read, show up to volunteer or to protest, or all the things that you can do to raise your voice, because it's needed. Everybody's voice is needed. Okay, do you think they heard me?
I hope they heard you.
I hope they heard
We'll make
me.
sure they hear you.
I can count on freaking one hand how many white people speak out publicly about race. You got Tim Wise, you got Pop, you like sports, you got Pop, you got Steve Kerr.
Steve Kerr.
Okay, come on.
There's the now former Piston head coach Stan Van Gundy. He was very open in his disdain of Trump and the entire. That's one of the few things that endeared me to him in Detroit was that.
Exactly.
Both Van Gundys, really.
I'm literally trolling Twitter. She knows, and whenever I see a white influencer, someone with a ton of white followers, speaking out against racism, I write down their name and I I'm coming after you, Sarah Silverman. I'm coming after you, Glennon Doyle. Oh, we got Matt McGorry. Matt McGorry counts on the good side.
Yeah. And I gotta ask the question now: how did you two come into contact with each other? How did you two first meet each other?
Melissa actually tracked me down.
Stalked her.
She stalked me. I had someone else say, "Hey, Melissa's looking for you. She wants to meet up with you." And I was like, "Oh my God, the woman that tweeted the video." Because just like the guy, the Obama staffer, that when the whole thing first happened, for a minute I was like, the fuck? I'm like, I was the one that said all this. And then when I met her, I was like, yo, she is so down. She is so down.
We were separated.
Yes. We met the following Monday, and it was just she was like, we gotta do something. And I'm like, absolutely. This, we have an opportunity to make a difference. If we can, we should try it. If we fail, we fail. We gotta try.
We're already doing it. We're already, look, it's not nearly enough, and we are very eager and anxious to get more people on board, and we have lots of stuff in the works.
Yes.
I met with Michael Skolnick a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and he's gonna help us get some white influencers on board, because
Heather McGee next week.
We're talking to Heather McGee.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm talking to the woman who started Pantsuit Nation at the end of this week, and she has millions and millions of followers in her Twitter. But just think of it. That day, she spoke up. I listened, I amplified it, and it broke through a lot of barriers. I mean, when's the last, how many times are people sharing these things in these siloed, well, I'm not gonna say so, just in the black and brown networks, because they're not sharing in the white networks. what is it, 8%?
8%.
8% of white people share or post about race.
And
that's a Pew study. That's like a legit study.
Yeah.
You know, so come on, people, speak up.
And for years, that's one of the reasons why I didn't post too much, because so much of my network is white. And again, it brought me back to that feeling of elementary school. Like, I don't want to post about race all the time because these white people are not going to get it. They're not going to want to see it. I'm a Debbie Downer. And then all of a sudden, I was like, you know what?
Exactly.
This is my life.
Exactly.
If they think you're a Debbie Downer, the hell with it. Just do it.
Right. And it's like, they're tired of seeing it. We're tired of living it. If you could, like, I have I don't want to name her name, but she has a problem listening to the news because it's so depressing. And it's like, first of all, how are you going to raise socially conscious children if you can't watch the news? But if you can't handle what's going on, imagine being in our shoes. 75% of the things that go on in my life, I don't necessarily talk about because you almost just learn how to be black. Like, you just learn how to internalize those things. It's like, I don't think that person likes me because I'm black.
And how do you have privilege and not speak up? This is what we're talking about, right?
Someone's calling me in a store, or like, I don't, just little things that if someone's rude to you and you wonder, are they racist or are they having a bad day?
You just kind of internalize it. It's the type of thing where you get used to it. Where I get pulled over by a cop. Before the cop is at my window, I've already got the license and registration sitting up on the dash. Because A, I'm putting it right. I just wanted to get out of the way. But B, I don't want to give him any ideas. I don't want him to think that I'm doing something. I temper how I speak. My voice enters the room before I do.
Oh, and guess what I do?
Yes.
I try to figure out how I'm going to talk my way out of it.
Actually, I do.
That's the thing. It's like you figure out how to talk your way out of it. But I try to put people at ease.
Yes.
This voice of mine intimidates people. Apparently, I don't know why. Anybody who gets to know me knows I'm not the most intimidating guy, but all they see is a 6 foot, 208 pound black man walk in a room with a big booming ass voice, have 4 tattoos on his arm, and I'm not sure if he's going to do anything to me or not.
Right.
The whole you may not notice the T-shirt I'm wearing likely will have Mario on it, or it has a PlayStation controller on it, or I'm wearing like some old throwback Detroit Tiger shirt.
Right.
I am not here to cause trouble, but you get characterized a certain way. Now, Michelle, you went to Penn State. Mm-hmm. What was it like out at Penn State? And I'm
so segregated.
As a fellow Big Ten representative, and apparently we both go to schools that have had their own fair share of controversy surrounding a bunch of different things lately. I've wondered about what that happened because I've heard some interesting stories about Happy Valley.
It was very segregated. I didn't actually have that great of a time, to be honest with you. I partied a lot. I drank a lot, but I made it a point. Like, I remember, like, we would sit at our lunch table and it'd be me, an Asian girl, a Spanish girl, and a white girl, and we'd be like, look at us. We are an example. We are the United Nations. You know, like, I never had all white friends at Penn State, but I felt like we were like a special group because it was so segregated. I mean, I would go to parties and I'm either going to a black party or a white party.
Yep.
It was not
the same way.
It was not integrated.
Same way at MSU. The only time you really saw a lot of black people, a lot of white people, everybody together was football games or basketball games.
Yeah, that's it.
On football Saturdays, you'd have thought it was the most inclusive place on earth in East Lansing. So you were in the Starbucks that day, Michelle. Mm-hmm. Describe what you saw firsthand. Before it goes viral, you're sitting in there and you're watching these cops cuff these 2 brothers up and haul them out for essentially sitting there. What did you see? What are you seeing and thinking in that moment as you're sitting there?
I want to explain it from the very beginning.
Go for it.
I saw them walk in from my left, and I had been watching them because I thought the one guy was cute. I'm gonna be totally honest. I was like, he is really, really cute. But I think he's too young for me, like whatever.
He's a little young.
He's a little young. I know. But you can't tell a black man. I'm like, is he 25? Is he 40? I don't know.
I can relate to that.
We had this conversation.
We did. Just today. So I watched them walk up, and they immediately went to the barista and said, "Can we use the bathroom?" And she said, "No, it's for paying customers only." And so they were like, "Oh, okay." And they sat down. And I saw her mouth something to herself. And my first thought was, she just said something racist. But I caught myself and I said, "Michelle, you don't know she said that. Now you're being judgmental. You have no idea what she's saying. Just relax, girl." I went back and did my work. Within a few minutes, the cops were there. So I said, I think my intuition was correct. I have learned to always trust my gut. And she pointed to the two men and she said that they are refusing to leave for not buying anything. And I was like, oh my gosh, this bitch is lying from the get-go. She is lying right now. I'm watching her. And I look over at the two brothers and they look up and they look back down. But then they look up again. And I would never forget the look on their faces. It was like, are those cops walking towards us?
Don't get into a fight with them. Don't get into a fight with them. What did they get called for? Was there two black guys sitting here meeting me?
Yes, I didn't know they black guys.
Well, what did they do? What did they do? Did someone tell me they did?
They didn't do anything. I saw the entire thing. They asked me in the bathroom. And the woman says, for any customers, they didn't do anything.
Is this? You can feel their anxiety, and so I started getting anxious immediately. I'm like, what the fuck? But like just what's going on? Like I saw her lie. They didn't do anything. I know they didn't do anything. I'm watching them. So cops walk over, and very quickly I got up to go film them because I was like, you know what? She's lying, and I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I need to at least start filming it, right? Mm-hmm. Because at that point there were only like 4 black people in the whole Starbucks.
And that's your voice. That just...
Yeah, when I was saying they didn't do anything, because I watched the whole thing, there was a white guy sitting next to me for 45 minutes who didn't buy anything. I saw a white woman come in and use the bathroom. She was mid-jog. I remember I think she even had purple or pink headphones. She came in, used the bathroom, and she left. And I remember thinking to myself, I wonder if maybe she works here, maybe she's like here all the time, and they just know her, they just like let her in to use the bathroom. I'm like, that was interesting because, those guys couldn't use the bathroom, but I saw her use the bathroom, so what's that about? And this guy next to me isn't buying anything, so like what to me it's like, okay, this is racism. This is clearly racism. So, I'm seeing them try to explain to the cops, they're not listening. I see another asshole cop walk in, he's all agitated, he's wearing the dark blue. If you're listening to me, you're wearing the dark blue. I saw you. You could just tell that he just wanted to do something. Like, they escalated the situation. They didn't buy coffees. It's a Starbucks. You can't tell me that you don't know people go into Starbucks all day and sit there. You can't tell me that.
I've been that guy before.
We all have. I was one of those. I mean, actually, no, I did buy a drink. But again, it happens all the time. So, the Andrew walks in, their friend, and everyone's like, what's going on? I tell the girl behind me they're being arrested for not buying coffees. Like, what is going on? And then I hear people start chattering behind me. And at this point now, I'm physically shaking and I'm sweating because I'm like, I need to do something. I don't know what to do. So I went up to the cop and I said, why are you arresting them? And he goes, go ask the barista. And I was like, that's an interesting answer. Why can't you answer me? But fine. So I went up to the barista and I said, why'd you call the cops? And her face got all red, her chest got bright red. And she was like, I can't say. And I was like, well, I can say. I saw the whole thing. They didn't do anything. I said, did you feel like your life was in danger? She wouldn't look at me. She wouldn't talk to me. She just kept working behind the counter, which pissed me off. So I said it again. I said, did you feel like you were being threatened in any way, shape, or form? And she would not answer me. So I walked back. I yelled. I don't know if I said F word or not, but I said, you're a coward. I walked back to my table. And I'm packing up all my stuff to leave. And I look up and there was like a bunch of white women just standing up and staring at me. And I looked, Melissa and I like made eye contact. And she was like, I was just here, I think the other day. And I come here all the time and I don't buy anything. And I'm not asked to leave and you know why. And then we all walked out and there was a lot more commotion as we walked out. But I remember I was just shaking. Like I had a meeting later that evening and I couldn't go to the meeting because I was so pissed off. Not only did I feel being black, I saw it. And the way the woman was just so dismissive and the way the cops were actually dismissive of me too. Like it was like, I remember the one cop he was like, well, you saw us. We weren't being disrespectful, were we? And I was like, you weren't necessarily being disrespectful. And I said, but do you understand that you're arresting them for not buying an effing latte? And then they turned around and they turned their backs to me because they didn't have an answer for that. And then we were sitting outside talking to a bunch of white women and they were like, we can't believe how calm they were. We would have flipped out. And I had a nice little white privilege, study session that day. I was like, and you would have been able to do that because you're a white girl. And they were all in agreement. They were like, yeah, you're right.
Yep.
It was really They handled themselves very well, but they out of necessity.
It's to survive. It's a survival tactic.
Yes.
It's a thing that we, as black men, we have to do.
No matter what's...
It's the you want to get mad. You want to get angry. You want to say, dude, what the fuck? You want to do all these things. You want to get pissed off, but you want to live. And I keep hearing my dad's words in my ear. Just get home.
Yeah.
Just get home. Don't worry. I know what they'll do to you. Just get home. He said, I'm 38 years old. My dad still says this to me. Just get home. Don't worry about anything else. Get back to the crib and at worst case scenario, let your lawyers handle it, but get home. And that's what I can tell from watching that video. And Melissa, you sent the tweet. Like I said, you sent the tweet seen around the world. What are you thinking when you first see this video and then you retweet it and it just goes hyper viral at that point?
So there was a girl sitting next to me, and I didn't actually video it. This other girl videoed it. And when we had all walked out, we were standing around. And I was like, somebody has to share this. And she was like, oh, well, so I'll send it to you. Mm-hmm. So I had no followers. I have like 300 followers or something on Twitter because I wasn't really tweeting. And I'm like, well, no, I'm going to tweet it anyway. So I'm like writing this caption, and I'm like showing, I remember showing Michelle. I was like, is this good? Is this good? And I was like, fuck it, I don't care. And I just tweeted it. And then I was like, I was so mad. I was like the angry white lady, which I'm allowed to be.
Exactly.
Because as someone said to me recently, you are the most innocent being on earth, a white woman, right? So I get called everything. I get called the white whisperer, etc. So I tweeted it, and then I was like, okay, well, let me try to share it with. I tweeted it at DeRay, and I tweeted it at Sean King. And I think Sean King was one of the first people. It took a whole 24 hours.
Yeah, because I was in New York at the NABJ regional conference, and it was around the middle. It was on a Friday because it happened on a Thursday. It's middle of the day Friday, but we had heard kind of buzz coming out of Philly about it. I'm sitting in this conference room, and I look at my phone, and I scan Twitter, and I see the video, and the first thing I do is just sit back in the chair and just shake my head. And I just immediately ask, it's like, what the hell is this?
So wait, explain. So I still can't get this is why I have to believe a lot of the reason it went so viral was because a white person was calling it out.
It's
because why if this it is happening every day, everywhere, why have we never seen it before? Or is it the white people haven't seen it before?
I attribute it to, well, for one, the fact that you tweeted it helps a ton because it gave a different voice. It's almost like it allowed people to be pissed off about it instead of just dismissing it as, well, it's just black people. Yeah. They're just doing this again. But when you send it out, it actually, unfortunately, lends credence to it.
Exactly, which sucks. Don't
listen
to me.
It lends credence to it. And yeah, we find ourselves in that position where, I've said this numerous times on various episodes of this show, that just think about what it would have been like had there been cell phone cameras and digital cameras around. I mean, the reason that Rodney King was such a big deal in 1992 was because a guy caught it on his camcorder.
Right.
And the shit was all over the country within 24 hours, where I'm in Detroit watching the LAPD beat this guy down, but you've heard for years and years and years that police brutality is happening. I've listened to enough of NWA and Ice Cube, and they talk about all this different stuff is happening. But then you actually see Rodney King getting the shit kicked out of him, and it's like, wow. Now with social media, people can send out videos, but they're at the same time, well, we don't know the whole story. It's that bias that kicks in. And there's a bias that if I tweeted that thing out, it may get a couple hundred retweets. If
that's what I'm
you get a white woman from Philadelphia, boom.
That's middle-aged white lady. I mean, it's like, oh, well, it must be true. What? People, listen. Don't listen to me.
Well, listen to you, but listen to us too. That's the thing.
White people, listen to me when I tell you to listen to them. Okay?
And at some point, we'll get to a point where they actually listen to both of us.
Exactly.
At the same damn time.
Well,
Listen
you know
to
what?
black women. Listen to black men.
Yes.
Listen to Latinos. Listen to Asians. Listen to the LGBT when they tell you that this shit is going on. Listen to white women because white women deal with their own wonderful issues. Hell, listen to some white men because apparently that's the only motherfuckers we listen to half the time. You have to be able to do this. So after all this is going on, now the tweet goes viral. This thing is everywhere. You got every Tom, Dick, and Harry trying to hit you up, including me, trying to hit you up to contact you to find out what the hell is this, what's going on. Because that was the total talk of where we were, to the point where a couple of reporters who were at this convention had to get on a train back here to Philly because shit just jumped off. So what is it on your end, and for both of you, as this thing is now really taken off, and how much have your lives kind of changed really in the last 6 weeks? Because it's only 6 weeks ago. It doesn't even say it was that.
It was only 6 weeks ago.
It's about six.
April 12th.
Yeah, it's about 6-8 weeks ago. So 2 months ago. We're 2 months past this thing.
I'm getting a lot less sleep lately. A whole lot less sleep because it's something that we found an opportunity and
We saw it work.
and it's still working. Most of our followers on Facebook, we have like 4,000 followers on Facebook and on Twitter, and it's a lot of white people, and they're actually reposting our information.
We need
to
way
their
more.
networks.
I know you're out there, white people. Follow us. It's PRIVTOPROG. Privilege to progress.
Yes.
So yes.
And I have to ask this because we live in the unfortunate age of Trump, and the MAGA people are not exactly the easiest to deal with.
Fuck the MAGA people.
That is definitely going to be in the promo. So what kind of backlash and pushback and trolling have you gotten from the Red Hat crew?
Oh, I get it.
I think she gets it more.
Yeah, I
I've
get
gotten
it.
almost nothing, which is very surprising to me. It's other white people
It's
that
white
are
people,
mad at
white
her
people, yeah.
for literally trying to get people together. But we're not seeing a lot of it, and I think it's because we're coming at it from an angle of we are just trying to educate people.
Oh, I see it. I mean, I get it. I get white people. I get some super racist white people coming at me. I had them in my DM. I mean, they're all over, everywhere. Twitter, DMs. They somehow find my email, phone. I got a phone message. I mean, they're crazy. But guess what? I got no time for you. Okay, like really, I'm not gonna change you. I'm not gonna get you to understand or educate yourself because, there are enough white people who are self-proclaimed liberal/progressives who are interested enough, who care enough about equality and who care about racism, and they want to get rid of it and they just don't know how. There are enough people that if we even get just those people, we're in good shape. I don't want, if we're the core and if your listeners are the core people they're on board, I want that next level out, that next level of a million people who might, and this is something Sean King said to us. He's like, maybe that person who puts a frowny face when they see something racism. Okay, maybe now I get them, instead of just putting the frowny face, to share it and to say something next time they see it in real life. So those are who we're going for, right?
Yes. People just need to be aware.
Yeah.
Just aware. Anyone that says that they don't see racism, no, you do. You see it. You don't recognize it, but you see it. Because we feel it all the time. We just don't talk about it.
It was the thing that I did episode 23, which was the day after. It was literally, that's the title of it, the day after, in 2016. And I said that my biggest issue with people was not simply the out and out racist Trump trolls. It was those who voted for him, but then tried to insist that they weren't racist.
Exactly.
Members of the Ku Klux Klan, members of white supremacist groups were literally taking victory laps around the country today. Men like David Duke, and I use the term man very loosely to describe him, were cheering this victory by Donald Trump. The Ku Klux Klan, endorsed this man. multiple times. They were doing robocalls for him in the South. But you're going to sit here and tell me that just because I support Trump doesn't make me racist. Yes, it does.
My thing is, it's that if his racism and the racism that follows him around, like that dust cloud that follows Pigpen.
Exactly.
If you look at that and you see it and it's not a deal breaker for you, I'm just going to assume you're one of them.
I agree.
You're just not the out and out ones. And this is a time where we need people like you, like both of you, to be able to get out there and really get out in front of this. And just saying this as a black man, greatly appreciate it, because we need every bit that we can get, just as men and as black people, but especially speaking as a black man, as I have been one my whole life. And no matter what you do as a black man, you're looking over your shoulder all the time. You always wonder how long before I, quote, wear out my welcome. How long before I have to go? I have to watch what I say, watch what I do. You're constantly on edge. This is vital. This is necessary. So
the silence is a problem. White silence is a problem.
It is a problem.
And I mean, even if you're not ready, white friends, to share publicly on your Facebook, do one thing, and that is, I bet you have one black friend, probably only one. And I bet you have never actually asked that friend what it feels like to move through the world, this country, in her skin or his skin.
Yeah, and I hear what people say, well, I don't want to ask, or I don't want to offend you. No, please ask. I would love for you to ask me so I can tell you what I'm feeling every single day. It is so frustrating. I was actually going to a party last summer, and I was walking in this house, and I saw a white couple walking by me, and they had a really cute big dog, right? And I was like, oh, your dog is so cute. And I immediately felt racism. I could just feel the woman wouldn't look at me. And the man looked at her and just realized how just blatantly she was ignoring me. So he made a couple comments, whatever, and I was like, all right, whatever, fuck them. And then my very tall, attractive friend came out of the house, and he was like, oh, nice dog. And she was like, ah, da-da-da. And I was like, this bitch, are you serious? just so blatant, right?
Right.
And then they're chit-chatting as if I don't exist. And then I was like, you know what? Let me just try one more time. Let me just say something. So I said, have a good day. And she didn't turn around. She just kept walking, her back was to me.
Jeez.
And then you walk in this party, and you're having a good time, but I remember I was making a sangria or something, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just I'm freaking pissed off. You know what I mean? I'm just and those are the things that you just hold it inside. You just hold it inside because, again, you don't want to be that person that's something just, you don't want to be that person that's always bringing the group down. But at the same time, these things are happening to us all the time. I can tell the difference between when a man looks at me because he's attracted to me, or when he looks at me because he doesn't like the color of my skin. I can feel that.
It's the microaggressions that people center up and deal with all the time.
Microaggressions. And so, just in Starbucks, when people say things like, oh, well, she wasn't being racist. You don't have to say the N-word to be racist. I could tell she was being racist. The second that she said something, I said, she just listened to me racist. And I had to catch myself and say, Michelle, you don't know if she said something racist, but then she did. So you know that you have those spidey senses and you feel it all the time. And I just want to educate people as to what is going on. And I think the problem is that they don't understand that there's different types of racism: environmental, and the healthcare, and the foods that we eat, where we live, literally. In every facet of our lives, racism plays a part in how we live in this country. People don't know that.
They don't get an understanding of it. When I think of, I did a lot of work in Chicago. And yes, I know. And by the way, just a memo to some of the white people: listen, don't ever say what about Chicago. Please don't. Especially don't say it to me, because I've been a part of vigils that have been held in that city for gun violence. I've seen people mourning their children and wondering and having to set up neighborhood crossing guards and neighborhood watches around intersections just to keep kids from getting shot out there. So when someone brings up what about Chicago, don't. I might slap shit out of you if you do it. When you talk about racism being an institutionalized thing, cities like Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, if you notice, a lot of these inner cities do not have things like supermarkets or stores in them. That is one of those things. It's like food essentially treated a certain way. That's how you heard of food deserts in places like the west side of Chicago not having food stores, or the entirety of the city of Detroit didn't have a supermarket until 5 years ago.
That's insane.
When a Whole Foods
North
opened.
Philly. I mean, I went to Temple. Like what's up in North Philly, especially between Temple and Temple Hospital? There's nothing. There are no like food stores. There's nothing.
It's amazing. So it's ingrained in a lot of things, and that's why it's so insulting when some of the MAGA crowd, or even some of our fellow progressives,
Yes.
who may not exactly understand,
Coming for you.
there's a few of y'all out there too. You're very progressive, but you just don't know shit from apple butter sometimes about black folks, and it comes through in some things they say, is that they don't recognize that, you see racism in everything, because that's literally what we're given.
Talk to your friends. Have a one-on-one conversation with your black friend, because I'm going to argue that person is not really your friend because you've never had this kind of conversation with them, and it affects every minute of their life.
Now you have kids.
I do.
What do you tell them about this? How do they handle this?
So
They're great kids, by the way.
They're great kids. Right after it happened, and it was so, like you said, it was like so overwhelming, and I loved the interview that I did. I didn't do an interview with anybody right when it happened, but I talked to Monique at The Root, who I love, and she's very supportive of us.
Yes, she's great.
And then I did the WURD, and then I ended up doing some cable. So I was so overwhelmed, and my older son was like, "Mom, why don't you just be done? Just like let the activists take over. You did it. It went out there." And I was like, look, I said, somehow, for all the things that came together, that moment, that it was Starbucks, that it was someone that looked like me, that it was that in the caption, that it happened to catch on, like that made a difference. And I can't stop talking then, because I can feel the difference happening with every conversation. And he's like, "You know what? Actually, you're right. You're like a double agent." I was like, "Yes, I am."
That is an interesting way to look at it.
So yes, they're very supportive.
They're super supportive. I guess the last thing will be the from privilege to. I want to make sure I get the name right here too. Privilege to progress. I almost said progression. Privilege to progress. What is the next move for Privilege to Progress, and the eventual goal of your group here?
So, so we have a couple of things. So we are asking white allies to show up by speaking out when they see something, by sharing on social media, and by amplifying the voices of people of color. Okay, so the first thing that we're doing is we're using social media to, and I've been saying desegregate the conversation, but really the truth is it's not segregated because there is no conversation in the white networks. So what we're asking is for white people to join us in sharing and speaking up in their white networks and asking their people to share, so that we can sort of infiltrate the white networks with information, so that there can be a larger, a social media conversation is only one thing, but a social media conversation, as we've seen, leads to mainstream media, leads to what we're doing here, one-on-ones, tons of one-on-one conversations that have been happening. So social media is number one. So yes, follow us. It's at PRIVTOPROG. It's called From Privilege to Progress. You can type that in. You can look up Michelle Saahene or Melissa DePino. We have links. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Yeah, and we're not even, we're not asking a lot. Just come to our page and read our articles. Educate yourself. If you really want to know what's going on, if you have friends of color, read what's happening. It is we are in the age of information. There is no reason for anyone to not know what's going on today. It is out there. If you know the rappers and the sport, you can read about race.
You can.
And just educate yourself so that when you see something, you recognize it. You can be an effective ally, but you have to be educated to be an effective ally.
You have to be educated. And so we want you to follow us. We do have a group called, we have a private group that is our ambassadors. And those are those people, those core people that have already educated themselves and are 100% on board and are willing to speak out publicly. And we are deploying them to then bring in other allies to also speak out publicly. And then we're also going to hold events. We're going to do a mass showing.
We have a lot of
13th.
Yeah, we want to do a mass showing of 13th. Like I said, that changed my life. It changed everything about my life. So we really want our ambassadors to maybe try and hold like different screenings around the country.
On the same day?
On the same
13th?
day. Yep. We want to have panels going forward. We want to work with Governor Tom Wolf right now. We know we're working on that. We're just trying to get as many white people, as many white influencers as possible that have a lot of white followers to get out the word, because we're living in a crazy time right now. Like, white supremacists out of nowhere are just showing up to run for office boldly. I don't think people understand the seriousness of what is happening to this country. I don't think people really get it. There's been an actual mass movement of African Americans moving back to Africa. People don't understand how traumatizing your life can be, from the minute you are born until your entire life in this country is rooted in racism, and people are sick of it. And it was okay for a minute. It never really like okay, but with Trump, it is spewing back up, and people are literally moving out of the country. That's insane. That's insane. We shouldn't have to do that. This should be, I try to watch my words sometimes when I'm talking about America, but it's land of the free. I can say whatever I want, right?
Exactly. First Amendment is all in effect here.
And part of that is being able to criticize it. And sometimes I think like the words are just words. You can say anything, but are you living by it? No. That's not what we're doing right now. And so I think people need to understand that this country was built on racism, and we need white people to help dismantle it.
We need white people to help dismantle it, because it has to be dismantled from the inside, from inside the white community. It has by educating yourself, by understanding that it undergirds all the things that are wrong with our society, criminal justice and healthcare and education, and it affects you too. It affects all of us. And just on a purely human level, if you don't use the privilege you have to speak out for the greater good for all of us, then we're not getting anywhere. We have to work together.
I guess one more question that just kind of popped in my head here. Have you had any contact with the gentleman in Starbucks?
I got an email from one of them, I think it was Dante. I can't remember because it was so long ago, but one of them sent me an email on behalf of both of them and thanked me for sharing it, and he said that he was that they were working on some projects afterwards, and would we be involved? And I said absolutely. So I'm in all of it. They were so brave. I mean, people say first of all, she was brave for speaking up that day, but the bravery was really on their part, because they sat there and they were calm.
You could feel it. You looked at them and you were like,
you could feel it.
How are you being so calm when this is not only is it blatant racism, it's embarrassing.
It's dehumanizing.
It's dehumanizing,
which is exactly what's happening, and especially now with the words that Trump is using. It's now more than ever. I'm not saying it wasn't always important. It's always been important, but now that white supremacists and blatant racists feel empowered by Trump, those who care about racial justice, about social justice, that care about America and care about human beings, we need to be louder than they are.
And you have privilege, which means you can be as loud as you want.
Yeah.
You can do anything you want, so use your privilege.
For progress.
For progress.
Yeah, and we use the hashtag show up, because there are lots of different ways you can show up. And anytime you're sharing, show up.
Any final words before we close this out?
No, I just think that, like I said, now is the perfect opportunity for everybody to get involved. We have the power. The people have the power, and I don't know if they realize that, but we're seeing it. There are strength in numbers, so we need to work together. We need a cohesive effort.
Yes, we need a cohesive effort. We particularly need white influencers who have a lot of white followers to speak up in their networks so that we can get the conversation flowing there too. Yeah.
And with that, I close this out. Thank you so much, Michelle and Melissa. I greatly appreciate your time and your hospitality. And on behalf of the countless other black men who've seen situations like this, to both of you, thank you for speaking out and for doing this, because it is wonderful, because we need all the help we can get as a people, let alone as black men and black women. So thank you so much for what you've done, and thank you for coming on JSC Radio.
Thanks, Jason. Thank you.
And there you have it. I can honestly say that of all the guests and all the interviews, well, conversations, because I don't do interviews, I have conversations. Of all the conversations I've had on this show, with all due respect to Adrian and Janae and Jasmine and Lara and Renee, that might have been my favorite one, and by far the most fulfilling. Michelle Saahene and Melissa DePino are amazing women. You should definitely follow them on Twitter at Michelle Saahene. Michelle, M-I-C-H-E-L-L-E, Saahene with 2 A's, H-E-N-E. Michelle Saahene and Missy DePino, M-I-S-S-Y-D-E-P-I-N-O. Be sure to follow them and go on Facebook and look up From Privilege to Progress and get on that list. Definitely. This is a conversation we all need to be having. And yes, my Caucasian friends, it definitely involves you, because, well, you're the ones who can truly get that ball rolling and make shit happen. My name is J. Scott Smith, telling you to take care of yourself. God bless. Always dare to be different. Always have your pet spayed or neutered. Remember to adopt and not buy. And we are out of here. Goodbye, everybody. The MAGA people are not exactly the easiest to deal with.
Fuck the MAGA people.
That is definitely going to be in the promo.
Check it out.
You're listening to the People's Podcast. This is JSC Radio.